hearing committee for August 10th, 2023. We'll call the meeting to order at 5 o'clock. We'll start with the pledge of allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call. The hearing board, Andrew,
I'm here.
The purpose of this meeting is to discuss the determination regarding the use of property for a boarding stable. I'm new to this. I know there's some background in this case that I'm not familiar with, and so I'm going to turn this meeting over to Andrew to conduct things, because he and the rest of the committee, I think, have some familiarity with what's going on in the past here, and I don't.
Yeah, not a problem. So we're here tonight to consider an application by Gerald Nasal, or Nasal, 64 Nasal Lane, requesting interpretation from the zoning officer for a boarding stable on the same lot as a single-family dwelling at 54 Nasal Lane. This property is in an RD agricultural zoning district. Mr. Ivory, would you be kind enough to give us an overview of the case before the board?
Yes, I wanted to start out with the things that were done as far as the advertisement. It was advertising, which I have a copy of. Okay. There is the listing that was sent out to the affected property owners, and I also have a picture of the posting that was posted, that needed to be posted 7 days before. And as you had said, this is a determination of an interpretation of an application that was sent in for a boarding stable. We did our review. The properties located in the RD, which is an agricultural district, and according to the determination of a boarding stable, we issued a permit for a boarding stable by those, by the criteria set up in the ordinance.
Okay. Would the applicant for the determination like to, Mr. Ivory, would you be kind enough to address the board?
Louis Emmy on behalf of my client, Mr. Nasal. Our concern is that the permits and the issuance of the building permits and the occupancy permits were improper. I understand that Mr. Ivory has indicated that they posted that information. I don't know where that was posted. I don't know what definition he's going by. He did not place that on the record. I would appreciate if he would place on the record what he believes gave the allowance to have that built up there, and has he checked the location since that date to make sure it's within the guidelines as the permit allows. So at this particular point, after he responds to that, I'll address a few other things, and then I'm going to let my client, Mr. Nasal, give his explanation of what he believes. He was an ex-zoning officer, so he has a lot more information that he would like to present.
Okay.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Ivory, I have no objection to you responding to this question.
No problem. The applicant had submitted for a boarding stable. We went by the definition out of the ordinance, which is in section 280-7, boarding stable. The keeping of horses and ponies owned by persons other than the owner of the stable, or the rental of horses owned by the owner of the stable for a fee or other form of compensation, which may include training of horses, riding lessons, and riding facilities. There was a barn that was built also that was permitted. The barn was permitted according to UCC standards for agricultural buildings. indoor riding stable had a building permit with it. When I said the conditions that we followed were, conditions property subject to all conditions under section 280 of 111, agricultural activity, specifically letter E, which also limits the number of horses.
May I ask a couple more questions? How many horses is it limited to?
8.
8 horses. And was there ever a traffic study done as to the ability for parking and the ability to get vehicles into the area?
The ordinance doesn't require.
Okay, so there's no ordinance that requires a certain amount of parking for a business structure?
It's not a business structure.
I'm sorry, you are?
I'm the other zoning officer. My name's Peter Greed.
Thank you, Peter.
A traffic study wouldn't be required in this circumstance. There's ordinance for traffic studies, but it wouldn't be for this. This is a residential use and it's permitted use in RD.
Okay, so in a residential use that allows boarding of horses, and it, from what you just read to me, Mr. Ivory just read to me, it says others people's horses, right? Isn't that what it just said?
Either or.
Okay, so my question is as people come up and they come up with their vehicles, shouldn't there be some type of permit for parking? Because now it becomes a business. It's a business, not a personal use. It's a business. So as a business use, there's no need to have a parking study done, how many spaces they have to have?
Wait, so your contention is that because it needs parking, it becomes a business?
No, because it's boarding and getting money for boarding people's horses, it becomes a business. So my question, and I just so I'm clear, my question is, as a business, does a business require to have parking for it?
It's not a business. It's not defined as a business under either the ordinance. It's considered a residential agricultural use.
Is an agricultural use is not for compensation? Have you checked that
That
out?
might be a legal question, but that's not a question of the zoning.
So does the zoning indicate anything in its book related to having compensation for things that are happening on your property?
It's not exactly defined that way, but there are certain businesses such as farming and agricultural uses, specifically in that particular zone, that allow for, I guess what you're getting at is commercial uses. In other words, you're selling something that you're
getting
producing on the property and getting, yeah, but I mean, farmers sell hay all the time. That doesn't make it a commercial business.
Well, I'm not, you're comparing apples and oranges. I'm comparing a property that's being used for boarding of horses that you are receiving income for. That's not a business?
I don't know that it matters in this case. The zoning is very clear. It's a permitted use in that zone to have a boarding stable. They require, and a riding arena. It's required to either be permitted use, a conditional use, or a special exception. It's a permitted use. Whether that's a business or not is a totally separate question, but for the purposes of what decision that made me issue the permit, it was a permitted use.
Though, are there other I'm sorry, you wanted to say something.
And I'll add to that.
Okay, sure.
There are other issues, like if you want to, if I would get an application for a different type of business, then my review would be different. And yes, it may kick it into traffic studies and where it needs to be in parking and lighting requirements. Yes, that exists in the ordinance, but it didn't apply in this case.
So there's nothing in your ordinance that describes income for services as a business?
Not for a boarding stable.
Okay. I have no further questions. Thank you, sir.
Will your client would you like to continue?
Mr. Nasal would like
Yes.
I'm going to leave Mr. Nasal to give you his information. Make it a little bit quicker than me questioning and answering. Thank you.
Okay, my name's Gerard Nasal. I live at 64 Nasal Lane. Next to the Miller's property. As far as my background, I have a BS degree with a concentration in land use planning. My first job was 1977 to 81, Lawrence County Planning Commission. In that job, I had to review comprehensive plans, subdivision, land development plans, and zoning ordinances for the townships, because the Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code requires townships to submit it to the county for review and for comment. Following that, I worked for Penn Hills Planning Department from 1981 to 1994. I've written zoning ordinances, comprehensive plans, zoning and land development plans, or excuse me, subdivision and land development plans. So I have an extensive background in planning and in zoning. And I have a problem with what went on here at the property. And I basically start with the submission that I gave you. Do you guys all have a packet? Okay, you have a packet, you have a chance to read it, I hope, but I'm going to read my appeal. My appeal does not ask for an interpretation. My appeal says, I appeal the issuance of the building permits 9824 and 9848 for the property of Kristen Renee Miller at 54 Nasal Lane for Hilltop Crossing Equestrian Center. That's the name of it. Appeal of the determination of the zoning officer allowing a business, a boarding stable, on the same lot as a single family dwelling. And it is also appeal of the waiver of the site plan requirements required by land development. Okay, on page 3. Page 3 is a parcel information from the tax records from Washington County for the Miller property. The property contains 16.9 acres and lists 1.5 story aluminum sided house and other structures. Those structures are an attached 2-car garage, a detached 2-car garage, a 2-story barn, a dilapidated chicken coop, and a 3-sided cattle shed. At least the last time I saw it was 3-sided. So anyway, that's page 3. Page 4 is a parcel map showing 54 Nasal Lane and my lot at 64 Nasal Lane abutting it, and then the Dunlap property at 10 Nasal Lane abutting 54 Nasal Lane on the other side. Additionally, it shows that Nasal Lane property where it leaves the Miller property above the railroad tracks, then through the Dunlap property by a single lane dirt road onto Route 88. Can you see that on your drawings? Okay, I have a colored one if you need it. Okay, where was I?
The trains run.
Oh, okay, the trains running that railroad track are freight trains and tank cars that carry oil and chemicals, and they have no set schedules and are a surprise when you're coming down the hill, down a steep hill from the Miller property, because there's a cut bank there on the left-hand side, and that blocks your vision. Coming from Route 88 direction, there's a bend in the road and also a cut bank on the right-hand side that limits your vision of the tracks to any oncoming trains. At Route 88 entrance, there's a very sharp bend at the bottom, so that a person exiting Nasal Lane and turning right will have to cross the center of the road, especially if he's towing a trailer. So there's no way any vehicle with a trailer could cross or make the right without crossing the center lane. I decided to do the rest of my presentation in a timeline, since I made contiguous and repeated attempts to stop the construction of the boarding stable until the proper procedures have been followed and the proper permits have been obtained. Since May 3rd, I have kept a daily log of my telephone conversations, emails, text messages, and activities going on at the property. Prior to May 3rd, there have been some new visitors arriving daily who drive up Nasal Lane and park their vehicles at the Miller property in the front yard and driveway and in front of the detached garage and along the edge of Nasal Lane. There was also some grading that went on, and I understood it to be for a private stable. And they were grading a flat area on top of the hill, me thinking it was for riding their horses. It was not until the post went in to the ground for the stable in the arena that I knew they were building something much larger than a private stable. Some posts appeared to be about 30 feet tall at the peak of the arena building. When I talked to the neighbors about it, they informed me that Millers were already advertising on Facebook and also had a website. After talking to Chris Miller, I talked to Renee Miller and told her that they should have had a meeting with the neighbors. She said that her and Chris had talked about it and that she decided against it. I told Renee that I didn't like the idea and I was opposed to the project. On May 3rd, posts for the stable and the arena have been installed. I reported the matter to Mr. Ivory, who told me that he would follow up. On May 4th, trusses for the buildings were delivered by trailer truck to the Miller property. Mr. Ivory told me that he had spoken to Renee in the morning and that the construction was on hold. On May 7th, in an earlier conversation with Mr. Ivory, probably on May 4th, he told me that if I had any comments or concerns to let him know, and I sent him an email on May 7th that's on page 5, 6, and 7 of your packet. Turning to that, I'm going to read that email. I know you guys have probably seen it. And this was addressed to Mr. Ivory, Municipal Consulting Services. Since I've been out of the zoning profession for 29 years, I asked the Chief Zoning Officer of Penn Hills how he would like to handle a similar situation. He said that he generally would request a meeting with the applicant, often with the fire marshal and building inspector present. And he tries to feel for what the real intended purpose of the property is. He asks the questions, what do you really want to have here? And what is your ultimate dream for the use of this property? He said that often their proposed use goes beyond what's intended in the ordinance. And after the meeting, based on the information gathered, he sometimes puts it in a category that would require public meeting. This way, he gets all the information out, questions from the public are asked and answered, and everybody knows what to expect. He explains to the applicant that he's not their adversary, but this can be their protection because all their planned activities have been brought out into the open and approved by the board. Also, conditions can be placed on the use of the property to ensure it protects the neighbors, the public, and the facility users. My personal comments are: the Hilltop Equestrian Center advertised as a home of the Dasta Hunt Team. According to their website, they currently have 63 members, and who knows how large this membership can get. The Equestrian Center advertises birthday parties and summer camps. Will there be other social and group events and competitions or horse shows? What's the maximum number of people they expect and the total number of cars? Will events turn into a circus or something like the Nasal Winery, where they're parked all over the place? So far, there have been as many as 18 cars parked in a front yard and along the private road. At an average of 3 persons per vehicle, this would be 54 people at the property at one time. All this traffic is coming in off of Route 88 onto a 10-foot wide, single-lane private road that has sharp bends, steep hills, and crosses a busy railroad track with no signals. There is minimum maintenance on a private road. In winter, there is ice and snow. In springtime, there is mud and ruts. In summertime, there's potholes and dust. Can the fire department get a ladder truck up the road? We need to hear from the fire department, the ambulance service, and the police. There's no question that this use is better suited for a location like the Mineral Beach property or next to Tractor Supply. In my opinion, the use goes far beyond what's intended for a permitted use. It clearly is a business. Depending on the involvement of the Dasta Hunt Team, it may fit under the category of recreation, non-commercial, similar to a tennis club or a private golf course. Otherwise, it may fit under the category of recreation, commercial. Second, a height variance is needed for the indoor arena. Third, by definition of land development, a site plan is required since the 80 by 100 arena plus parking exceeds the 5,000 square feet requirement. Building plans, number 4, building plans will be required under the building code with engineering stamps on the plans, since restrooms, exit lighting, possible sprinklers, and so on may depend on the maximum occupancy of the building. Concerns about fire safety, snow loads, and wind loads must be addressed. In closing, be advised that I have not read the entire ordinance since it is not in a printed booklet form. Therefore, there may be other details I've missed. Respectfully, Jerry Nasal. All right, that's that. Okay, so the next pages, okay, I would like to read for the record, okay. Page 8 through 14 is information that was pulled off of Facebook and the Hilltop Crossing Equestrian site. You probably have all read it, but it discusses the hunt team with 63 members, birthday parties for $350 for up to 10 children, and $20 more for each child, more than 10. Horse camp for $200 per child, riding lessons in their 80 by 100 indoor riding arena. That's what those pages cover. All right, here we are to May 8th. May 8th, I went to the township building and I asked to see the file on the Miller project. The secretary searched the file, told me that it was not in the office. I filed a standard right to know law request form. An agency has 5 days according to state law to respond. See page 15 in your packet. You have it right there, you see it. Okay, so here we go. It's May 9th now. Contractors are at the property erecting the trusses on the boarding stable. There was no building permit on the property. I called Mr. Ivory, who told me that under agricultural use, there is no building permit required for the construction of a barn to house animals. This is after I notified him by email of the business of Hilltop Equestrian Center, yet he's still trying to call it agricultural use. I disagreed, knowing that they had up to 50 people at the property at one time. This is not a barn that's an accessory use to the property. He told me that they have not finished reviewing the application yet. He said that he had discussions with Renee 3 times and Pete 3 or 4 times. I asked him how long he's had the application. He said he had the application from late March or early April. He didn't have it with him. I advised him to watch the time limits for review. I followed up with an email sent the same day on May 9th, and that's page 16 and 17, which I'm going to read for the record. Dear Mr. Ivory, this morning at approximately 8:30 a.m., I reported to you that the contractors were at the property next door putting up the trusses on the boarding stable after you stopped construction. By this evening, the entire roof has been completed and a great portion of the side walls. In addition, they had dug a ditch for utilities from the house toward the stable. You told me that under an agricultural use, accessory farm buildings are exempted and that they are exempted from height restrictions. So you allowed them to continue with the construction of the boarding stable. You stated that the arena structure is still under review and a building permit application is also, I'm saying this by the way, a building permit application is also an application for zoning approval. I believe the issuance of the permit was a mistake. The definition of a principal use in your ordinance states the primary or predominant use to which a property is or may be devoted, and which to all other uses of the property are accessory. Since the primary use of the property is residential, you cannot have an additional principal use as a boarding stable. You cannot have 2 principal uses on a property. A private stable, however, is permitted as an accessory use. But it does not include all the uses stated in the boarding stable definition. So it's either a private stable or a boarding stable. Section 280-11 General District Regulations state, in all zoning districts, single-family dwellings and two-family dwellings shall be the only principal structure on the lot. I have already stated to you that the neighbors and I oppose the use with all the visitors and traffic on a single lane private road. Please notify me of any permits issued since I plan to appeal. Okay. That was May 8th, by the way. Here it is, May 9th. Contractors are at the property erecting.
You already did.
Oh, I did that one, I'm sorry.
Do 511.
Do 511. On 5/11, May 11th. I sent an email to MC Services and Attorney Laker, who forwarded to Solicitor Makel describing the work that is currently being performed with two photos. The one photo shows the completed boarding stable with a ditch for utilities that had been dug and filled in, and the post for the arena. The other photo shows a new stone road going up from the Miller driveway toward the arena. Okay, in your packet,
Bless you. Thank you.
I'm saying see page 18, 19, and 20 in your packet. I'll read the email for the record. Okay, this email says, work continues on the stables. It is nearly complete with roof sides, doors, and the outside. I do not know about whether the stalls have been installed yet. Today there were some workers on ladders working on the arena. Yesterday a road was installed from the current driveway up to the arena, also a utility ditch dug from the house to the stables. Why is this activity continuing? It should have been stopped since you informed me that no permits were issued. The business continues to advertise on their website and on Facebook. Yesterday evening, there were 6 to 8 vehicles on the property coming and going. Please respond. Are attached with the photos of the stable and the driveway. You guys have them, the board has them in your packet. I have them in color if it helps you see the photos better. So anyways, that's page 19 and page 20.
512.
Okay, now, May 12th. Attorney Laker sends an email to Union Township Solicitor Makel advising him that he is preparing a mandamus action. All workers left around noon that day. On 5/15, May 15th, construction woke me up at 6:10 a.m. with the noise of hammering, loud equipment, and chainsaws running. There were 7 workers constructing the arena. At 7:20, I sent an email to MC Services and to Attorney Laker. At 8:30, I called Mr. Ivory and got no answer, so I left a message to inform him that the arena was being constructed and to do something about it since I was told that the permits were still being reviewed. I went to the township building looking for the information on the right to know law. Later that day, I received a letter from Attorney Makel's office requesting 30 more days before he would give me the building permit to file. See page 21 in your packet. you guys have probably read it. But anyway, well, I'm going to read it.
Hey, look, I don't mean to interrupt you, and I don't wanna cut you short, but for purposes of efficiency, if you wouldn't be opposed to submitting any written comment, I'll make sure that it gets in the file on the board.
Okay, well, you have page 21.
Sure.
And you see there where they request that they be given till June 14th, all right, to give me the file. Okay, so here I am, we're in May 16th now. I received a right to know packet. Okay, this, a day later, after this, the attorney says that he's going to file mandamus, so I received a packet. See page 22 through page 31. And I'm sorry, I have to read this. It says, Dear Mr. Laker, pursuant to our recent email correspondence, I have attached the following documents. Building permits, 9648 dated 5/9/23. Zoning review prepared by MC Services. Building permit 9824 dated 5/9/23. Agricultural building exemption form from MC Services dated 5/9/23. Building proposed from MQ Structures. You should note that the proposed use is a permitted use. Additionally, the use is a permitted agricultural use and is clearly defined boarding stable. The building code also does not view this as a commercial building. The aforesaid is contrary to your paragraphs 15, 16, 17, whatever, 20 of your draft complaint. As always, if you have any questions, give me a call. Okay, so that was from the solicitor to my attorney. Okay? So the next few pages, you have what was in there, what was in that file, supposedly.
You've
Can I
noticed,
have a sip of water? Well, she has it, she has it. Okay. The first thing that I noticed upon reading Mr. Nakel's email and reviewing the packet is that there were no building permit applications. There are two large buildings that have been constructed on a property and not a single building permit application. How do you approve a building permit without an application? Where is it? Is there one? My neighbor Ed Volker just got a permit for an equipment storage shed on his property. He filled out a building permit application, and that was on the Union Township website, and paid a fee and was granted a building permit for an accessory use. Where are the receipts for the building permit? According to Union Township fee schedule, building permits for a non-residential, doesn't say commercial, it says non-residential building are 50 cents per square foot of gross floor area. The 9,600 square foot non-residential arena should have a permit fee of $4,800, and the 50 by 80 boarding stable at 4,000 square feet, it should have a permit of about $2,000. What did the Millers pay? It's not in the file. Where's the occupancy permit for the boarding stable or the equestrian use? The Millers have been operating their business for 2 or 3 months without a legal occupancy permit. Where's a site plan? A site plan is required for any non-residential structure or structures that exceed 5,000 square feet. This will be discussed later when I talk about the zoning ordinance. I got a part 2 to this. Page 23 to 26 shows the plans of the arena. They were produced by a sales company or some material supplier. They are not certified by an engineer. As required by the Unified Building Code, which is what Union Township goes under. There is no engineer stamp on the drawing, therefore there's a question of whether they meet the Unified Building Code. After all, these buildings will be used by customers, visitors, and guests, including children. Remember back in my email of May 7th, I talked to Mr. Ivory about meeting snow loads and wind loads and fire safety. Also, please note the date of the drawing on page 23. This March 30th, 2023 date agrees with the time that Mr. Ivory told me that he received an application. A short time after that, materials were ordered, contractors were hired, grading began probably around mid-April, and Renee Miller took the risk in moving ahead with the project without a building permit in hand. Okay, page 27. This is what Solicitor Makel is calling a site plan. It appears to be something pulled off of Google Earth or something like that. You know what a site plan looks like, right? Do I have to show you one? I'd like to show you one. Let me see here. Okay, here's the site plan here. And this is the site plan that actually came from Penn Hills. And, will you hold that one? It shows the location of the building, parking areas, stormwater management, catch bases, utility easements, entrances from the state highway. All this on a plan that shows how the property is going to be developed. Part 2?
Yep.
What about the?
They go to say that, and they go to
You know what I'm
two,
talking
and then they go to two, consider that.
All right.
I've explained to him to get to the last couple points so that you can.
Okay, yeah, because I want to make sure we get to questions, because I'm sure that the board members have questions. Thanks.
Okay. You know the municipality planning code gives me 7 hours to make my case. And I don't plan on that, of course, but I have a lot of information and I'll try my best to cut it shorter. But those building permits that you have in front of you, construction started 2 weeks before the building permit was actually issued. The building permits weren't issued until a day after I asked for the right to know, that I asked for the file. In other words, when I asked for the file, there wasn't a building permit. They were written afterwards.
Or two.
Okay, in your file, you have in your submission, I'm going to speed things up. I'm going to go to page 31. Okay, the agricultural exemption form, agricultural building exemption form is what Mr. Ivory was talking about earlier. I looked for this form on the Union Township website, could not find it. I looked for it under MC Services website, couldn't find it. I asked other people if they could find it, they couldn't find it. I asked Ed Volker if he was required to complete one for his equipment storage area. He said no. The form has a letterhead that says Municipal Consulting Services, so I assume that it came from their office. But in the middle of the page above Renee Miller's signature, it says representatives of Jones Township. So they borrowed it from somewhere. All right, and you know, that's not a real problem there, but so the definition, okay. I draw your attention to the bottom of the page, and please look at it while I'm reading it. Agricultural building, it says agricultural building, a structure utilized to store farm equipment, hay, feed, grain, and other agricultural horticultural products, or to house poultry, livestock, and other farm animals in a milk house. The term includes a carriage house and used by members of the recognized religious sect for the purpose of housing horses and storing buggies. The term shall not include habitable, and then it drops off. Go to the next page, page 31A. This is out of the Uniform Building Code. This is what the form should say. At the end of that was cut off, it should say the term shall not include habitable space or spaces in which the agricultural products are processed, treated, and packaged, and shall not be construed to mean a place of occupancy for the public. So what they're saying was, what they're calling an agricultural exemption doesn't follow under that definition whatsoever. Because of those last two sentences that says if that building is used by the public, it is not agriculturally exempt.
I'm gonna interrupt you for a second.
Sir, let him finish, and then you
Well,
can say,
I'm just gonna
excuse
make
me,
a point of-
I'm gonna make a point here. He's in his statement, he can, at that point, he can say whatever he wants, take a note, and then when he completes,
Fair
then you
enough.
can, thank you. Just trying to keep it moving.
Okay, this is probably the most important sentence in the definition, because it tells you that wait a minute. It tells you that a boarding stable which rents space to the public and is used by the public to take care of their horses is not an agricultural exempt building. Furthermore, the term has been altered. The form was altered so that the last sentence could not be read, and which would help support the claim that the boarding stable is an agricultural exempt building. Altering a government form with the intention to deceive is a criminal offense. we can see that this occurred before the form was signed by the magistrate Thomas Miller, because his seal extends down below the area which would have contained the last sentences that were omitted. Okay, I have another form for you, that page, that, let me see that. Okay, there.
This? Yeah.
And this was done by a consulting firm that wrote a article called "Do I Need a Permit?" And it's based on a unified building code. Okay. Anyways, you read the area that's highlighted or in dark print, and this just supports my information telling you that horse barns for private use are considered agricultural. Horse barns for commercial stables and equestrian training sessions are not considered agricultural. So their statement that this is agricultural stuff, that is not, it's not agricultural. And there's my support also. No, I can find that. All right. My attorney wants me to move ahead.
Ryan, then what we're gonna talk about now?
Here's part two. Excuse me. Can I have a simple one? Here's part two. Part two, that dealt with the Unified Building Code and the fact that this building does not fall under agricultural exempt. This part here deals with the zoning ordinance. Here you go. Okay. The zoning officer wrongly tried to use the definition of agriculture exempt in the Unified Building Code to exempt the building, or to exempt the business and structures of the equestrian center or boarding stable from the zoning ordinance, calling it agricultural. The building code and the zoning ordinance are separate ordinances, and their definitions, rules, and regulations are not to be used interchangeably. In other words, he can't say that this is agricultural exempt building and still not apply the zoning ordinance or the site plan ordinance. But he did. And so anyways, following that is the Union Township zoning ordinances. I wanted to read you definitions out of the zoning ordinance. Following words and phrases shall have particular meaning of interpretation of this chapter. Agriculture. Okay, the science of and art of farming, the work of cultivating the soil and producing crops and livestock. Okay? There's no agriculture going on here. There's no production of crops. There's no production of livestock. There's no food. Okay, boarding stable. The keeping of horses and ponies other than that of the owner of the stable, and a rental of horses owned by the owner of the stable for a fee or other form of compensation, which may include the training of horses, riding lessons, and riding facilities. Okay, with the two definitions, it's easy to see that the boarding stable is not agricultural, and that the boarding stable and arena are not agricultural buildings. Rather, the definition of boarding stable fits a business containing the words rental, and fee and compensation. Page 36, we have, we could skip that part. Page 40, principal use. This is very important. The primary or predominant use in which a property is or may be devoted and to which other uses on the property are accessory. Principal structure, the building or structure to which the principal use is conducted. Accessory use or structure, a use or structure located on the same lot with the principal use or structure that is subordinate and incidental to the principal structure and the use of the property, and which may occupy separate use of the structure and or area on the ground, including but not limited to sheds, garages, swimming pools, decks, fences, and so on. And they're listed. They're listed. On the Miller property, the principal use is the residence. The barn, the garage, and the dilapidated chicken coop and the cattle, those are, and the cattle shed, those are accessory buildings. The boarding stable and the arena are a second principal use that's not permitted, since the definition itself of principal use says that all other uses of the property can only be accessory. As an accessory use and subordinate to the incidental to the principal use are things such, okay, I mentioned that. All right, moving on. Section 280.11C, in all zoning districts, single family and one family dwellings shall be the only principal structure on the property, on the lot. Comment, let me see. Okay, this section adds further support to the discussion that there cannot be two principal uses and two principal structures on a lot, and that a single family dwelling is always the dominant principal use.
Want to go to the end?
What's that?
Do you want to just go to the end of the page?
Well, we have to talk about land development. To cut it short, your ordinance talks about land development in the definitions. And in the definitions, a non-residential building more than 5,000 square feet is considered a land development. Therefore, a site plan would be needed for this because the arena itself is 9,600 square feet. So a site plan would have been needed, one like I showed you, not like one that's on page 27. Height variance is still needed because your ordinance says that any accessory building or any building other than the principal structure has to be a maximum of 15 feet. The arena is 30-some feet. I don't know what it is at the moment. Anyway, the zoning officer would, there's a section in the ordinance, that talks about permitted uses in an RD district. And those permitted uses, it says, permitted uses, and then under permitted uses, it says principal uses. And then it lists the principal uses, all of the principal uses, which are single-family home, boarding stables, animal hospitals, nurseries, greeneries, greenhouses, and so on. Accessory, underneath that it says accessory, and then it says sheds, fences, and so on. What they don't want you to take into consideration is the principal use, is what I explained to you before. They're saying, this is all permitted use, and yeah, they are all permitted use. But the ordinance says that you can only have one principal use, and on that property, it's the house.
Leave it there. Leave it there. Trust me, leave it there.
That's it.
Okay, thank you.
Not that I meant to kick off earlier, but we booked our stenographer with the condition that she could make it to a 7 PM hearing, and I've been looking at her and I don't want her to have to.
I'm sorry.
Violate speed
I
limit to
had,
get to our next
I
hearing.
had much more.
Okay, before you sit down, would any of the board members like to ask any questions to Mr. Nozzle?
What is the major problem you have with the boarding stable up there? The idea that it's there?
No, not, a number of things. The people that are coming to the property now, that we never had visitors there unless they were invited. The traffic coming up and down the road, there's no place to pull off the road, so somebody's gonna have to back up across the railroad tracks, especially if they have a trailer on, or they gotta back down on a Route 88. And now we have a safety issue. The number of people using that road coming up and down, somebody has to pull off. Our privacy, our peace and tranquility that we had. We get a lot of noise from the property, a lot of shouting and whatever. Horses whinnying, I mean, that's not so much.
You live in the country, you're gonna have the horses.
I understand, but the problem is more the people, and one or two horses on a property under a private boarding stable would not be offensive. But when you get 11 and 12 horses that are going to be on a property, 50-some people showing up from time to time, 20 cars parked, that's a nuisance.
Any other members? Any questions, Mr. Hampton?
I have questions, but I think we need to talk as a board.
Okay. All right. Mr. Ivory, would you have any, or would either of you gentlemen have any questions for Mr. Nozzle?
No questions, no. I have some response to some of the
Okay.
statements, but.
All right, Mr. Ivory, you have any questions?
I can,
Okay, you can sit down, Mr. Nozzle. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so if you would be kind enough to give us some input before we talk to the property owner, I think that would be helpful.
Sure. There's a lot there, but I'll try to keep it as brief as possible. What's that? Sorry. Mr. Ivory already stated pretty much how we came to issue the permit. I did a zoning review. Anytime I get a building permit, first thing to do is the zoning review, because if it doesn't pass through zoning, I can't issue a building permit. I did that almost immediately. He already stated everything that basically, and it's in your packet. I'll leave that on the record. You guys can review that. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. It was as straightforward as most permits are. I go and look at the map, RD, go look at the definition. Is it a permitted use? It either is or it isn't. Sometimes it's conditional use. In this case, it was a permitted use. I then also look at what might come up in the definition. In this case, I wanted to look at the definition of a boarding stable specifically and see how the riding arena was going to be addressed. I also then went, because in the actual permitted use section, it states another section to go look at. That's where the agricultural conditions are. Well, it says subject to, so that usually points me to a separate section where there's other conditions. There happen to be in this section, so I had to review those as well. In doing all that, I ultimately was my determination that it was in fact a permitted use. Mr. Nasal, am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yeah, that's fine.
Mr. Nasal's, I understand his point in saying that it's two permitted uses aren't typically allowed on a property. I don't know why they wrote it this way, but that is the way your ordinance is written. He makes a somewhat valid point, but if you see that there's only A, B, C, and D in the permitted uses are just those uses that are agricultural in nature. In fact, one is agricultural. That would, to me, would fall under the definition that you read as a farm, most farm uses. Some ordinances, they leave it there. Most now, as we go on in time, have broken out the boarding stables and
I'll
the
object to
kennels.
what other ones are doing. If it's not in your
Fair
ordinance, it's not relevant.
Just what I've seen in my experience.
I understand, but it's not in your,
Fair enough.
ordinance.
My state of mind at that point is clearly, letter C is boarding stable. Allowed. Then I go to the definition, read the best definition of boarding stable, literally says boarding stable and riding facilities. Also, as a side note, there is a private boarding stable in your ordinance versus a public boarding stable. Well, in your definitions, boarding stable, private, and public. This is the public one. So it's a permitted use as far as I was concerned, and I issued the permit. As to the site plans, under your attorney, I don't know if you can get your name, but under the attorney's questioning, is there a situation or scenario where it might go into the land development subdivision ordinance that would then require a more traditional site plan like that? There could have been, but there just didn't in this one because it's a permitted use under the ordinance. So that's why I ultimately issued the permits. And as far as the exemption, the ag exempt, I think that was a little disingenuous. He brought up that we issued an ag exempt in order to confuse and conflate the building permit with the zoning ordinance, and that's not what I did at all. The determination was made about zoning and whether it was permitted use, and then in the building, once it passed through that zoning, we issued the building permit. It just so happened that the boarding stable itself was allowed to be an ag exempt building, which basically means they don't have to get inspections and it's an exempted permit. No inspections, no nothing as far as the state's concerned. And the riding facility did not fall under those conditions. And that, he's right, that comes out of the UCC definition, but that doesn't have anything to do with, this is why I tried to interject. It doesn't have anything to do with, basically the ag exempt form is just, am I going to issue an ag exempt permit under the UCC, or am I gonna issue a traditional building permit? Doesn't have anything to do with the zoning questions before you guys, which is why I tried to interject. But that's about it. I mean, that's where I was at with my.
Yeah, I don't have any objection there.
I just have a couple
Yeah,
questions.
yeah.
You would agree that in a zoning ordinance, in their booklet form or their online form, there's multiple sections, right?
Yes.
You would agree that a principal use is a residential use, correct?
No.
No.
So if I have a
Principal
home on my property, it's not my principal use?
Principal use could be, a principal use could be.
Sir, I'm asking him the question right now. So I'm gonna ask again. If in fact I have a house on my property, what is that property being used for? It's being used for my home, is that right?
Under that question, yes.
And that's principal use of that home, right? And it even says in the variance that a principal use is a residential area. It says that in your documentation, right? You read that.
It says what?
It says that a home is a principal use. It says it in that ordinance, right? Do you know if it says that or not?
There's a definition
Yes.
of a principal use.
Is a home.
No,
It doesn't say that in there?
a principal use can be any principal structure
Sir,
on a lot.
I understand that, but I'm making a point here. I'm not trying to trick you. A home is considered a principal use in your ordinance. Is that right?
It can be.
Okay, so if I have a home on there, that's a principal use, right? My
Yeah.
home is my principal use. Is that
Yes,
right?
Yes.
So, when it says it has to be subordinate, that means it has to be something that goes to that home, right? Isn't that what that means?
When what says what?
If I'm gonna build something else, it has to be subordinate according to your ordinance. Is that
I
right?
believe they use the term accessory, but yes.
Accessory.
Right.
So it has to be for something for my home. A garage, a shed, a pool, something that goes to that home, right?
Generally speaking,
Okay,
yes.
so now I'm gonna build a boarding stable up on top,
Correct.
which is not a permitted use as a principal use because it's a second principal use. Is that right?
Except that the ordinance says it's a permitted use.
It's a permitted use if it's a principal thing. It's not principal.
I understand your point.
So my
but-
point is, let me finish. So my point is, if you have one principal use and your ordinance says you can only have one principal use, right? Even if it's a permitted use, if it's considered a principal use, which this is, it's not allowed. Isn't that right? Because it's two principal uses, right?
It's correct under your scenario, yes.
Okay, so in this,
But also under that scenario,
Mhm.
every farm in this township would be illegal.
sir, I'm not asking that question.
Okay.
I'm asking about this
Fair
one in
enough.
particular. So in this one in particular, we have two principal uses on that property. Isn't that fair to say? We have a boarding stable and we have a home. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay,
fair to
and that's
say.
not allowed.
It was my determination it's allowed based on the way this is read.
But what I just told you,
My
and I'm reading your ordinance, it's not allowed, is it?
I wouldn't say that.
Okay, I think the
That's
board
your
gets my
opinion.
point. That's in your ordinance. It says in your ordinance, one principal use.
There's-
And I don't care if it's a permitted use. If I have a blank piece of property and I want to make a principal use on my property and I put a boarding stable there, absolutely, principal use. But then I can't have a second principal use on there. You have two.
Okay. That's your appeal.
That's not
That's
my
what
appeal, that's
you're-
what I'm telling you.
I know that's what you're telling me.
And-
It's
and
your
you're-
opinion.
sir, I understand
You're
you wanna say you
fighting-
made a mistake.
Okay, no,
Hey,
calm down.
calm down, guys.
Okay.
No,
Okay,
I didn't.
You
I'm
get
not-
my point.
Yeah, can
I just wanted to be on the record that he said, I understand, you know you made a mistake. I don't accept that language.
No, I understand.
First of all.
I understand.
All right.
I
Second
withdraw
of all,
that.
To go back, that's the question, my answer to you would be, that's the question for the board to answer. I understand the point you're making about it being two principal uses.
But you're the building inspector, you're the one that gives the approval.
Yeah.
But I have to read the language
I wanna-
the way it's written.
I'm gonna let it go. You get my
All
point.
right, can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And this is just for the board's knowledge, okay, I'm not issuing an opinion.
I understand.
Okay. On agriculturally zoned property, is it possible to have two permitted uses? Like a house and a stable?
It's possible and it's very common.
But it doesn't say it in the ordinance.
Okay, is it possible to have two principal uses?
It's possible and it's common. In,
So it's possible to have two principal uses and it's possible to have two permitted uses on one parcel?
yes, and if I could further
Sure.
explain, I don't disagree with their premise, except that the way this ordinance is written, to the statement that I made earlier, it seems to me the reason why they specifically broke out the agricultural, animal, boarding stables, and kennels is because they know that that's a problem. If you have because single family dwelling is right underneath of it. And if you have a single family dwelling and you have something in there for most other circumstances that you don't want two principal structures on the same lot, you typically don't want that. So they have that as a prohibition. But in order to negate that prohibition, they said, well, I'm speculating as the people that wrote the thing. I have to interpret it the way it's written.
Okay.
They seem to, for these agriculturalist uses specifically, just these 5, they broke it out and made it a permitted use under the ordinance. But when I'm interpreting it, I can only read it and interpret what's written. I can't speculate and say, well, it should have been this way or it should have been that way. I just read it as a boarding kennels of principal use. And if you guys want to say, if they want, they're appealing, you guys, it's a question for you. If you want to let their opinion be
I have one
what
important
it is,
question.
then that's fine.
Yeah, sure.
I have one important question. You've indicated that half the farms around here would be out of, that they shouldn't be the way they are, right? Is that what you said? Half the farms around here.
According to your scenario, that's
Right.
exactly right.
But those farms have been here for 50, 60, 70, 80, 100 years, well before any of that was written, isn't that right? This was
Doesn't
farmland.
matter if the farm was
Sir?
open today.
This is farmland, right? This was all farmland. So when you say that half these farms can't do what they do, now, let me finish.
Okay.
Most of those farms had been here well before those ordinances were written, correct?
Okay, the same would be true if I got a building application for a barn that already had a house on the
I
property tomorrow.
But I'm not saying a barn's not being able to be used. It's an accessory use to what you're doing. If you have a farm there and you're going to put a barn there, it's accessory use to what you do there, right?
No.
Okay, I have no further questions.
Okay.
You get my
I
point.
think he was making the point that there are pre-existing non-conforming uses.
Right.
I think
That's
all-
true.
Okay, yeah, that's all I'm saying.
Thank you.
Okay, can we hear from the property owner? All right, will you be kind enough to?
I'm going to move so he could feel a
Yeah,
little
yeah.
more comfortable, so I'm not sitting right on top of him.
Just one, hard for the property owner to respond because we did not get that packet that Mr. Nozzle provided.
You don't have to respond point by point, but if you could just tell us what's going on there.
I understand, but kind of hard to respond to anything if we didn't get it here. I can't hear a word. Oh, okay. I said, kind of hard for them to respond.
Could you come up here?
Oh, okay.
And I need your name, please.
Tom Miller.
Tom Miller? Thank you.
Okay, kind of hard for them to respond, and I'm gonna be very brief here, and then I think Christopher wants to say something. Kind of hard to respond to anything when we did not get a copy of the packet. Okay, so we can't,
And you're not required to respond to every.
I understand that. Okay, Mr. also brought up something, he talked to the zoning officer in Penn Hills. There's a big difference between the municipality of Penn Hills and Union Township.
We'll stipulate that that's true.
Yeah. Okay, he talked about the roadway there and about getting a fire truck or an ambulance or police department. Same is true with that. You know, regardless if there's a boarding stable or anything up there. There are 6 houses up there, you know, and it's the same road. So an ambulance, a fire truck, or a police car would have the same, you know,
We'll stipulate to that also that there would be the same type of situation for an ambulance or truck to get up to the homes.
you know, and the Millers made an offer to take care of the road and do some things on the road, and they were denied that. Okay, in fact, yeah, they were, there, but no trespassing signs along the road. Okay, the road is the only method of ingress and egress into the property. And also, Mr. Nelson, I guess he put in your packet an article on letters on building permits or something. Just recall, that is not law. That is an opinion of somebody. And I'm sure you could get some other author that would write an opinion totally contrary to what that is in your packet. Yeah, it's opinion. And you know what they say about opinions. Christopher?
Your name, please.
Yeah, my name is Chris Miller, one of the owners of 54 Nasal Lane. Just to clarify for you, and I'll be brief as well. Hilltop Crossing is the buildings. The Dasta Hunt team are the people who board the horses there. There may be 60-some people that like their Facebook page, just like there may be thousands that like the Finleyville or Union Township page. That doesn't mean that there's going to be 1,000 people at the meeting every single day. I don't know when there was, I'm not sure, he said 20, I believe 18 to 20 cars. The most I've ever counted, which I'm at my residence every day, is 9. They are all parked off of the roadway, either in my driveway, next to the green barn that was there when we bought the property, or completely off the roadway, which is still on our property and nowhere close to anybody else's property. He mentioned having to back all the way down the roadway. There's nowhere to pass. I have a full-size Ford F-150. Mr. Nozzle has a full-size Dodge Ram. There's been multiple times that I've been able to pull off the side of the road because he was coming down, I was coming up. Nobody had to back up, it simply passed. Happens every day. Other than that, there's really nothing else for me to say. There are basically, there's not gonna be a circus. He brought up what is gonna be going on with the property. There's no circuses coming to town. We're not having any large shows. There's boarded horses there from the Dasta Hunt team. They give riding lessons as provided in what a boarding stable is. There's been birthday parties and they give lessons to special needs kids for therapy lessons. That's all that happens. That's all that's going to happen. We don't plan on making it any larger. There's no plans to have any big shows. That's what it is and that's what it's going to be. That was my wife's dream. That's what she's doing. That's all I have.
Okay, before you sit down.
Also, I did have one more thing.
Sure.
Like was stated, we offered to take complete control of the road, to fix the road. I have a text message memorialized from one of the neighbors that says, do not touch the road, do not fix any part of the road on this property.
That was from me, but I never received any offer to fix the road. That was a preemptive email.
Okay.
There was never an offer.
Can I read the text message? The end of it is after construction is complete,
For
we
the
will be
board's
sure.
purposes, we'll stipulate that he made that application and somebody denied it.
Okay, can you get that to us somehow?
Absolutely, if you
Okay.
can give me a card, I think
Yeah,
100% to you.
Okay, would any of our board members like to question Mr. Miller? Any questions?
You own the property very end of that road? Is that where your property
I'm
is?
sorry, say that
Is
again.
your property at the very end?
We are completely landlocked. When you come off of 88, it belongs to 10 Nasal Lane. Once you get to the railroad tracks, that's where ours begins. If you go past our house, that's where Mr. Nozzle's property begins. If you go to the back, his name was Bo Marriage. His wife continues to live there, but we are completely landlocked all the way around.
So you're right across the tracks on the left?
Correct, on the right.
On the right, okay.
There's a little bit of my property out there at the tracks.
Yeah. I mean, I was up in there years ago. I hauled cattle out of there for,
Right, they've had cattle there in the past.
yeah.
I believe up until we bought the property in 21. There was a barn on the property that they had horses in. One of the neighbors used to ride horses there. So this is not something new for the property. There's been horses, cattle, a ton of.
Yeah, I mean, years ago, I hauled cattle out of there, but yeah.
Yes, sir.
Was a site plan presented?
No,
to the zoning
so
board or?
everything that the zoning board requested is what we gave to them, which,
I went through a building project on 51 back in '07. I had to have a very detailed plan of buildings, parking, etc., which would explain the number of factors.
right, so there were
Can you answer that question?
there were multiple things that were requested from the zoning commission, all of which were given to them. I'm sure he has a list of everything, and if we would go back in emails, everything that was requested was given to them. But I'm not sure if, what was it, a site plan? I'm not sure if that was completed or not. He would,
The site plan usually includes the buildings and structures that you're gonna put on, viewpoints, design, etc.
which I believe those were provided,
Well-
which they'll be able to better say what was asked for and provided.
The site plan, again, because this became a permitted use in a residential district as a residential use, there's a differentiation between a site development and something that comes out of your subdivision land development ordinance.
This is a business, isn't
No. Well, yes,
it?
it's an
They're not
agricultural
growing,
business.
They're not raising anything.
You don't have to in agriculture.
Mr. Chairman, do you have any questions for him?
I don't.
Okay, do you guys have any questions for Mr. Miller?
I have no question.
No, I
Okay.
don't have a question.
So I have a couple questions. So how many horses are there? What are you doing on a regular basis?
There's 8 horses that are boarded by the Dasta hunt team. Her name is Charlene. We feed the horses, we water them. That was the trench that was described. It's not from the house, it's from where the meter is. It is metered itself for that part of the property. Basically, we do the daily needs of the horses. We feed them, we water them, make sure that they get everything that they need. My wife also provides riding lessons.
Riding lessons, okay. And who owns the horses?
It's called the Dasta hunt
That's
team.
not- Okay, and as far as all of the, we talked about the use, as far as all of the structures, are they totally finished?
Yes.
Are there any structures that are halfway done, or?
No.
They're all?
No, which one? I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
Peter,
Peter.
Green.
He has come up and seen the finished product since.
Okay. You're good.
Thank you.
That's dismissed. Okay. Are there any members of the public that would like to offer public comment on this topic? Okay. Any other questions from anybody else? Anybody want to add anything?
Yeah, just add a couple more things. As stated there, I kind of breezed over the fact that I issued an ag exempt building permit. The boarding stable itself fell under the ag exempt. This is building code, but pertinent to the zoning hearing board hearing. I did inspect the structure, and when I was going through the building, it was a stable, the riding arena itself, because your ordinance says riding facilities. I was definitely aware that a riding arena can be in different variations. And so my question to the applicant was, are there gonna be any kind of seating or anything like that? Just so the board knows, this is just basically a riding arena surrounded by walls. It's literally, there's no seating, there's no public area. There's a little corner box viewing area that's like, I think it's
10 by 10.
10 by 10. In the corner with windows so that assumedly the parents or somebody can watch when their kids taking lessons, but short of that, there's no public area for this building. It's an unoccupied structure. It's all dirt floor for the horses to ride around in.
Okay.
So I did inspect that.
That's another key. It's an unoccupied substructure. This is brought up about the height. And there's a part in the ordinance that gives an exemption from heights for buildings that are not occupied, have human habitation. That's why there was no height exemption.
Okay.
You have more questions?
No.
Mr. Nasal, your appeal, as I read it here, you're appealing the issuance of the building permits. And you explained the reasons for that. You're appealing the determination of the zoning officer to allow a boarding stable on the same lot as a family dwelling. And you're appealing the waiver of a site plan requirement. Those are your 3 issues that
Yes,
you want this board to consider.
yes.
I think, given all the information that everyone has passed our way tonight, I'm not prepared to answer those questions right now, without taking a lot deeper look at this information and some more information and talk with our group here. So I would like to temporarily adjourn this meeting to give us some time to do that.
Yeah, unless either of the parties have any objection, what's that? Okay, so let's,
Yeah,
You don't have an objection?
no,
My client would have no objection to issuing a written ruling rather than have to bring everyone back here again.
A written ruling.
If
Okay.
you guys are good with that, that's fine.
That's fine.
Okay. All right, so what we're gonna do, we're not gonna make a decision tonight because there's an enormous amount, as everybody would agree, of legal issues that we have to deal with. The board is not determining whether or not there should be a stable there or not, and whether it's a worthy, project, or whether it's nice to have horses, or, whether it's, ruining a road or something. Those aren't the issues that are before the board. The board is going to spend some time addressing some very specific, narrowly tailored legal, issues as it relates to issuing building permits and what have you. So if it would be, okay with the board, I'd like to ask that the board, temporarily suspend the meeting, and we'll reopen, next month. And in the meantime, if the board does make a decision, we have no objection from either party to, issuing a written, memorandum of, facts and conclusions of law. So at this time, I would like to ask for the board to, make a motion to suspend the meeting.
Make a motion that we submit.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Mr. Hanford and Mr. Powell.
Aye.